Hello, everyone. This is Anish Man Shrestha. Thanks for joining my session. Today, the name of my session is Four Languages, Four Journeys Within the Soul. So this is the agenda. First, I'll be doing a short self-introduction. And my session, it'll be basically divided into four sections, in which each section I'll be talking about like each of the languages that I've been studying as a hobby. So the first section will be about Spanish, followed by Portuguese, which will be followed by French, and then last it'll be Chinese. And then after that, I'll be talking about the generic language learning tools that I've been using and I've found useful, and that'll be followed by some conclusions. And after that, I'll open the session for some Q&A sessions. So first, a bit of self-introduction. My name is Anish Man Shrestha. I'm originally from Nepal, and I've lived there until high school. So after I graduated from my high school, I moved from Nepal to Japan. And for the first year, I was doing a 1-year intensive Japanese language course, which was in Osaka. And upon completing that, I went to Tokyo to do my bachelor's in computer science. And followed by that, I did my master's again in computer science from the university called Tokyo Institute of Technology, which is also called Tokyo Tech. And currently, I'm working as a software engineer in Tokyo. And I've been studying languages as a hobby for more than a decade. And this is a rough chart of the languages that I speak and the levels in which I speak them. So in native or almost native level, I speak Nepalese, which is my mother tongue as well, English, and then Japanese. And then in advanced or like a higher intermediate, I speak Spanish and Portuguese. And in intermediate, I speak French and Hindi. And in lower intermediate and below, I speak Mandarin and Newari. And the Newari is the language of the ethnic group called Newars. There are many ethnic groups in Nepal, and the Newars is one of those ethnic groups. And here I have put the red font for the four languages in which I'll be doing the presentations in later. Bueno, entonces desde ahora yo voy a hablar en español y yo voy a decir o yo voy a ir cómo empezó mi aprendizaje de español. Bueno, cuando yo estaba en la universidad en Japón, en Tokio, yo jugaba en un equipo de fútbol y la mayoría de los jugadores eran de países, bueno, donde se habla español, particularmente de América del Sur y también de España. Así que yo diría que el español era como la lengua franca del equipo. Y entonces eso me dio una buena oportunidad para realmente aprender el lenguaje, porque yo jugaba, bueno, una vez a la semana, yo también practicaba una vez a la semana, entonces por 2 días a la semana yo estaba en un lugar donde se habla, bueno, español. Y aparte de eso, yo también escuchaba o todavía escucho las canciones en español de cantantes como Juanes o Shakira o Alejandro Sanz, etc. Y luego yo voy a hablar sobre los desafíos que yo encontré cuando estaba aprendiendo español y mi plan y acción sobre esto. Y en el caso de español, el español fue la primera lengua romance que yo estudié, así que tuve que aprender una nueva forma de pensar, porque, bueno, el proceso de pensamiento en el caso de los lenguajes romances es difícil que en el caso de inglés, yo diría. Por ejemplo, el modo subjuntivo, que yo diría que no se usa mucho en inglés, es muy común en el caso de español. Y también otra otro desafío fue encontrar una persona que hable español, porque, bueno, yo vivo en Japón y Japón no es tan cerca de Sudamérica o de España, entonces es muy, bueno, no es fácil, ¿eh? No es fácil encontrar una persona que hable español cuando tú vives en Japón. Y después yo voy a hablar sobre mi plan y acción. Y primeramente lo que yo hacía, bueno, aparte de practicar con mis amigos en el equipo, hay un website que se llama Spanish Tech. Es muy buena y ellos también tienen su channel en YouTube. Y yo he ponido el link del Spanish Think en ese slide. Y aparte de eso, ellos también tienen una página de reglas gramaticales. Y bueno, yo diría que eso es muy extensa y realmente te ayuda a construir el núcleo del idioma. Y otro recurso que yo usaba mucho es el word reference. Yo creo que, bueno, muchas personas en esta sesión han oído hablar de word reference porque es un sitio muy bueno. Y bueno, yo usaba word reference en dos casos. El primero es como un diccionario y el segundo es, bueno, como una herramienta para las conjugaciones de verbo. Entonces, bueno, si tú quieres saber las conjugaciones de cualquier verbo en español, Word Reference te da un muy buen herramienta. Y en el siguiente slide, bueno, esos son los dos libros. Bueno, yo usé otros libros también, pero yo he ah, esos dos libros yo diría que son los más usados o que me han ayudado mucho. Entonces, espero que, bueno, estos te vayan a ayudar también. Então, agora eu vou falar sobre português e a minha e como eu comecei a estudar português, né? Então, ahm, no mesmo time de futebol que eu havia falado anteriormente, havia alguns jogadores do Brasil também e à medida que o meu nível de espanhol melhorou, eu comecei a perceber que também eu conseguia entender mais ou menos, né, quando os brasileiros se falam entre si mesmos, ou se conversas em português. Além disso, eu também adorava ouvir as músicas de bossa nova, porque eu acho que são muitas melódicas e eu sempre quis entender o significado das letras também. Ok, agora eu vou falar sobre os desafios quando eu aprendo português e o meu plano, a minha ação para melhorar o meu nível da língua, né? E como menos falando de português do que falando de espanhol, ao menos no meu círculo, para mim é mais difícil encontrar situações, ou eu diria criar situações em que eu possa praticar o idioma português, né? Por exemplo, eu tenho, bom, se há um amigo de Espanha e amigo do Brasil, se eu falo em espanhol, então o amigo de Brasil entende mais ou menos o espanhol, né? Mas se eu falo em português, o amigo de Espanha é muito difícil para ele entender português. E outro desafio que eu encontrei quando eu estava aprendendo português é que, como as duas línguas, espanhol e português, são muito parecidas, É muito fácil, né? Confundir e misturar essas palavras e acabar falando portunhol. E o meu plano, a ação, foi, bom, nos primeiros dias eu pratiquei principalmente falar com meus amigos brasileiros na universidade e eu também havia alguns jogadores no Brasil, não? No time de futebol, então treino e fala com eles também quando eu tive a chance. E, bom, a parte do esportes, eu também faço um pouco de música também e eu toco um pouco de violão. Então, eu estava assistindo os vídeos de tutoriais de violão em um sítio web que se chama cifraclub.com.br, onde as aulas são em português. E isso também me ajuda muito a melhorar o meu nível de português. Ok, agora os recursos do estudo de português e o livro se chama Pois Não, e esse livro é criado para os falantes de espanhol. Então, se você já tem essa base, né, a base de línguas romances, como funciona indicativo, subjuntivo, interativo, porque, como você sabe, espanhol e português funcionam muito similares, né? E esse livro me ajuda muito para aprender mais rápido, né? E o outro livro que se chama Modern Brazilian Portuguese Grammar. Bom, esse livro é para as falantes do inglês. Eu diria que esse livro também é muito bom e também me ajuda muito. Donc, maintenant, je vais parler sur le français. Et comme ça a commencé, comme j'ai commencé à étudier français, voilà, dans mes cas, je suivi le cours de base, de initiation en français à l'université. Et quand j'ai commencé à apprendre le français, je connaissais déjà l'espagnol et le portugais dans cette mesure. Et donc, pour moi, je dirais que ce n'est pas très difficile, hein. Et par conséquent, j'avais déjà une compréhension du fonctionnement de langue romaine. Et donc, sur cette slide, je vais parler sur les défis et mon plan et action sur cette slide. Et semblable à portugais, il n'y a pas beaucoup de francophones dans mon endroit. Et bon, surtout dans le Japon aussi. Donc, il est assez difficile de trouver des situations où on peut pratiquer le long. Et aussi, la prononciation du français peut-être un peu tricky, hein, peut-être un peu assez délicat à la cause de règles comme de lésions. Je dirais que dans le cas de espagnol et portugais, c'est plus facile pour prononcer le mot. Mais dans le cas de français, bon, comparativement, je dirais qu'il est un peu plus difficile. Et sur mon action et plan, je pense que la seule façon d'améliorer, bon, en quelque chose, je dirais, est de parler et de faire beaucoup d'erreurs et d'avoir un feedback loop en temps réel, in real time. En gros, plus dans le cas de français qu'un espagnol ou portugais car la prononciation dans le cas de français est plus délicate, plus difficile. Et autre truc, autre chose que je fais, j'ai des sessions d'échange linguistique en ligne avec les personnes qui commencé à parler beaucoup de langues, polyglottes et dans la langue maternelle et français. Et c'est plus utile pour moi et pour elle aussi. Et maintenant, c'est sur les ressources d'études de français. Oui, donc c'est le livre que j'ai usé beaucoup. Il s'appelle Modern French Grammar et c'est un livre très, très bien. Et après cela, je vais parler sur le modèle mental commun applicable à la langue latine. Euh, le espagnol, le portugais et le français sont de langue latine. Dans lesquelles sources sont les mêmes. Il existe des modèles communs dans la pensée, dans le thought process. L'expression et la variation de verbes et la vitesse d'apprentissage peut être améliorée en reconnaissant du modèle. Par exemple, dans le langue latin, il existe un concept de mood, de humeur, euh, comme l'indicateur, le subjonctif, l'impératif. Et si vous le maîtrisez dans l'un, vous pouvez l'exploiter dans l'autre langue aussi. OK, dans cette slide, ici, nous avons le tableau de conjugation de trois langues. À gauche, il y a l'espagnol. Au milieu, nous avons le français. Et à droite, nous avons le portugais. Et comme vous pouvez le voir, les trois langues sont les trois modes, des modes humour. Le premier, le indicatif et subjonctif et impératif. Ainsi, la façon de penser dans notre langue est très similaire. 下我要讲中文了，中文如何开始的？在我大学的一年级，我们不得不参加第一外语的课程，除了英语，由于我的日语知识，我对汉字有很好的理解，所以我想我可以用它来学习中文。以中文是世界上最大的经济体之一，所以我认为努力提高我的中文水平，可能是对我，嗯、我的可能是提高我的中文水平，可能是对未来的一样很好的投资。中文调整以我的计划与行动。中文只有学好至少2000的汉字，才会累积的理解。对于每个字符我们需要理解怎么难写，我们需要并不容易。还有是一个声调语言tonal language，所以我们彼此使用正确的声调发音，是不是那么容易的？日语的汉语的相似之处，数据的概念，日语汉语是相同的，比如说1、2、3、4、5，1、2、3、4、5，的汉字的1、2、3、4、5的相同，日语与汉语，OK，中文学习去完。左边有日本对学习中文很有用的书，呃，是叫《Modern Mandarin Chinese Grammar》。右边是拼音图，它音频，呃拼音 chart with audio。OK，这个 是 Chrome extension 这个工具对于阅读中文网站非常有用。如果你的 mouse 放在文本上，它将显示字符的多处中文 pop up. And from now, I'm going to talk about the general language learning skills tools that I use and which are useful for basically all the languages. So the tool that I use the most now, because I've reached a decent level in most of the languages that I've been studying as a hobby, is the Chrome extension, which I'm sure that most of you know as well. It's called Language Learning with Netflix. So I'll just point out some of the features of the tool. You can choose from multiple subtitles, and you can click on the subtitles to know its meaning. And you can also set your own dictionary, which means that the tool is quite flexible. And in the case of Latin languages, you can learn the meaning of the words and check the conjugation of the word as well in case it is a verb. And for character-based languages, for example, Japanese and Chinese, it also displays the reading of the characters, which is very helpful, especially when you're just starting to learn the language. So this is one small example in the case of Spanish. So you can take it as a sample for Romance language. So here you can see that the subtitle. And one of the things is that you can watch two subtitles in at the same time, which is really helpful. So here you can see like tienen, right? And like tienen is like they have, like, which is like third person plural of tener. So basically, if you click on tienen, this new pop-up shows up. And if you look at inside the pop-up, it's a bit difficult to look at, but you see like GR, WR, RE, PO, etc., right? So here the WR stands for word reference. So when I clicked on that, I get a new pop-up. And here it is called tener. And here I've marked this red box, which is called basically the conjugation. So when I click on that, like I get again a new pop-up, which basically is the conjugation table of that particular verb tener. So what I'm trying to say is that it makes the whole language learning process very, very fast and very, very effective. Like basically just within a couple of or maybe 3 mouse clicks, you can get a whole lot of information that you can use to improve your language. Okay, and the next one is in the case of Chinese. So again, here, as you can see that there's the Chinese characters, kanjis, and if you look at the top of those characters, you see those readings of the characters, which is really helpful. And you can see the meaning of the subtitles in English as well by setting the secondary language as English. And here again, as I said, there's like multiple dictionaries that you can set, and you can just select one of those dictionaries to look for more information about that particular word or about that particular character. Okay, so finally, I come to the conclusion. So learning 4 languages as a hobby while doing a full-time job, it's definitely not an easy task. But I think that everyone can improve their levels by doing the following. And well, it's no secret, but yeah, I think that these things will really help. So the first one is make continuous efforts. So just like any other skill, I would say language acquisition requires lots of time, effort, and patience. So it is very important to avoid instant gratification and rather focus on your long-term goals. Because I would say that even in my case, when I was learning Spanish or Portuguese or French, I think that I'd put continuous effort for maybe like 1 year or so, like before I started seeing the fruits of my efforts. And the second one is don't be afraid to fail. So we human beings, we have a natural tendency to be afraid of failure and to avoid it. But I feel that failure is indispensable for learning. In fact, I think that our growth in any field or any discipline is a repetition of failures and successes, in which gradually the rates of failures decrease and the rates of successes increase. And last but definitely not the least is to ask for help. So obviously, if you don't put the effort from yourself, nothing will happen. But there's a limit to the efforts of the limits of efforts of one person. So what I want to say is that if you have something that you don't understand or have doubts about, I think that especially in the case of language learning, it's better to ask someone, for example, a native speaker of the language, because there are cases when sometimes some grammar structure or some expressions might not be making some sense like logically, but it is just the way it is. So I think in just cases, like rather than trying to analyze it and then trying to make sense out of it, I think it's just easier for you to like just ask a native and then like understand the phrase as it is. Um, so that brings an end to my presentation. Thank you everyone for listening. And so I've seen some. I'm seeing some comments by the listeners. So thank you very much for that in the private chat. So I will start replying to those um, questions. So the first question was, "Hello, did you learn specific dialect in Portuguese from Rio, from Sao Paulo, others?" To be honest, I would say that I did not think about like some specific dialect. Like I would say that I have a Nepali accent when I speak in Portuguese. But having said that, when I speak with my Brazilian friends, they kind of say that I've got the carioca accent. Porque quando eu falo em português, eu falo quando é e coisas assim. Então, meus amigos do Brasil me dizem que, Anish, você tem um sotaque de Rio. So yeah, I think that's the accent that I have as of now. But yeah, like I didn't make any in any specific effort to like learn some particular dialect. Okay, so moving on to the next question. Ok, est-ce que c'est bon pour trouver cette table avec la déclination avec le verbe en espagnol, français et portugais? Déclination. Qu'est-ce que c'est déclination? Just give me one sec. Bon, okay, I think it's better if I answer in English because so that everyone can understand. So the question was like in the table that I shared, like what are the differences or like what are the variations that I could that one can find in the case of the verb tables of Spanish, French, and Portuguese. Well, I would say that they're more or less the same in the case that all three of them they use what indicativo, subjuntivo, imperativo. But having said that, there are some like there are some tenses that are not used that much in one language and like used commonly in the case of others. For example, I think that the past preterite is not used that much in French. Like the French they just prefer to use the passé composé, whereas the preterito and then the imperfecto is used commonly in the case of Spanish. So I would say that like those kinds of things are different in those cases of the languages. And the third, hay un sitio web donde se puede encontrar todos los libros que se mostraste durante. Okay, so the question is there a website where where we can find all these books that I've had shown during the presentation? Well, website no, but you can find or like you can buy all those books in Amazon. So yeah, like I think that that's the only thing that I can say. At least like all those books that I've shown, like all those books can be bought from Amazon. Um, so the next question is, have you ever tried using the app called Anki to learn new vocabulary? Unfortunately, like I myself have not used Anki, but a few of my friends like who are learning Japanese have done, and they have good reviews about it. So I can't say for myself, but yeah, I've heard good things about it. So basically, like as far as I know, it works on the principle of repetition. So you kind of repeat, like looking at a word until it is like ingrained in your long-term memory. So yeah, I think that I think that maybe it depends on the personality as well, but it can definitely be useful for some people. Um, do you feel a noticeable change of personality behavior when you speak, sorry, switch between these languages? Yeah, definitely, I would say that. Especially, I would say that when I speak in English, and then when I switch to Japanese, I think that I like unconsciously become like much more polite, I would say, and then I tend to say like more sorry and more sumimasen. Like sumimasen is like uh, excuse me in Japanese. So I think it's more about like how the language is designed, or like how the language, the cultural mindset of the people, of the native speakers of that language. Like you kind of unconsciously start to think that way, I would say that. So definitely, yeah, there is a notable change in my personality and behavior when I speak languages, especially in languages in which the culture of the native speakers of those two languages are like very different. Okay, so then the next one is okay, o que você acha sobre os sotaques do português, do espanhol e do francês? O que você acha sobre os sotaques nessas línguas românticas? Bom, eu okay, so first I'm gonna explain the question. So, um, uh, what I think about the accents of Portuguese, Spanish, and French, and then what do I think about my accent in these Romance languages? And okay, so I think that my Spanish accent is kind of a mixture of, I don't know, to be honest. Like, I think a lot of it is Mexican accent because a lot of my players from that football team were Mexicans. So, like things like way and stuff like that. So mm, I, I, I tend to use those as well. And yeah, like there's some players from Argentina as well, and maybe a couple from Spain as well, and from Peru, Bolivia. So yeah, I mean, I really wouldn't say that, like my accent is like this accent, but I think that it's more like leaning towards the Mexican accent. E sobre o meu sotaque do português, like as I said, like when I was learning Portuguese, I didn't make any conscious effort to, like learn the accent of Rio or learn the accent of São Paulo. But when I talk in Portuguese with my Brazilian friends, they say that my accent is carioca. And about the third one, French. To be honest, like I would say that my level of French is like still not at the same level of as my Spanish and Portuguese. So I still like have not reached that level, like where I can start thinking about accents. So like I just talk the normal French, maybe like with a bit of Nepali accent, if that makes sense. Okay, so the next question is. Um, Unfortunately, I don't speak Chinese yet. What would you advise? How can one start learning Chinese? Would you recommend starting with learning characters, grammars, and or maybe pronunciation? That's a very good question. I would say that it depends on like what other languages you already have in your repertoire, in the sense that like if you already know Japanese, then you have a very good understanding of how kanjis, like how the characters work, right? Like how to write those kanjis, and what do those kanjis mean, like more or less. I mean, there are some cases in which the same kanji can mean different things in Japanese and Chinese, but they're quite rare, I would say that. And So depends on, like where, depends on your starting point. So if you speak Japanese, then yeah, I would say that you've already got a head start, a big head start. But if you don't speak Japanese, then like if you're starting to speak Chinese from zero, I would recommend you to like start from the basic conversations, and then not to focus too much on kanjis, because it is a lot of work. Kanjis, you have to be able how to read them, how to write them, how to pronounce them. So, and then especially when you're like starting to learn a language, there's always, I mean, there's already so many things that you need to put in your working memory. So trying to like learn too many things at the same time can be a bit demotivating for some people. So I would say that yeah, try to make it fun, and focus on the speaking part, like trying to talk like some very basic conversations with some natives. So that'll also help with your motivation. I have a very general question. Okay, the next question: did one language bring more satisfaction than another? That has been the case for me. I don't want to be nosy. Don't answer if it's too personal. Um, yeah, I mean, it's not a nosy question. Yeah, I mean, like all of us have our own like motivations, like when you're learning languages, right? So, for me, yeah, I would say that learning Spanish and maybe Portuguese as well, brought me the most satisfaction in the sense that because Spanish was the first language that I started to learn by myself. I mean, yeah, I did speak other languages before that as well, like English, Japanese, Nepali, and then other languages as well. But like they were not in a setting where I was venturing out by myself, and then trying different things, and then like trying this trial and error. Because even in the case of Japanese, I went to this extensive Japanese language course where you had to study like for around 6 hours a day for 1 year. So obviously, like you would reach a certain level of certain level of fluency in that language after 1 year, right? So yeah, I would say that because of the fact that I had to put a lot of effort when I was starting, and also because I tend to like really like the culture of South America. Like be it Spanish speaking South America, like Portuguese speaking South America, like Brazil, and then Argentina. I really love the culture there, the music, the sports, the food, everything. So yeah, I would say that it definitely brought me more satisfaction because I felt that I was like getting closer to being able to communicate with them. And then yeah, there was like instances when I was talking to a Brazilian friend of mine, and then his parents who don't speak English, like they're more than 80 years old, I guess. Like he was talking to them on Facebook video, I think, and then I was just like talking to him, and then I said hi to them, and I could converse with them in Portuguese, in the native language, which was a very very happy moment for me. So yeah, I would say that like if you do it thinking for like money or thinking for like some other like external motivation, it can be a bit difficult because it is a very long process. And yeah, like if the motivation doesn't come from inside, it's very difficult to maintain it for 2 years, 5 years, or even a decade. um, the next question is a great presentation, Anish. Thank you very much. Do you incorporate reading in your learning process? Yes, I do a lot. In fact, I would say that yeah, it is um, the major portion of my learning process, I would say, because whenever you're talking to people, I mean, even in English, I would say you're just using a limited section of the vocabulary. So even though you're communicating with a person, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're improving the level of your vocab, the different ways in which the same way can be said. But for example, like if you read a magazine, or like if you need to read a novel, then it's going to be hard, but you will really improve your vocab. And then you will also like understand how the same thing can be said in like many different ways. And one of the good things about reading is that you can read at your own speed. So you don't have to be dependent on the other person talking. You know so yeah, I do incorporate a lot of reading in my learning process. The next question is: was it difficult to learn Portuguese and French one after another? They have very different pronunciation and little similar. Yes, I would say that. So in my case, I learned Spanish first, then Portuguese, then French. So I would say that learning French after Portuguese was definitely harder than learning Portuguese after Spanish. Just because of the fact that Portuguese is more similar to Spanish than French is to Portuguese or Spanish. And yeah, you're right about the pronunciation as well. I would say that Spanish and Portuguese, like Spanish especially, is a language which is called like what you see is what you get. So like you really don't have to guess that much about what might be the pronunciation of this word, right? And for example, like in English, the same letters like ch. When you say chair, it means cha, but when you say choir, it means ka. But in Spanish and Portuguese, to a big extent as well, like you can kind of guess like what is the sound of the word. But in the case of French, like there are liaison, there's some verbs. I mean, there's some words like in which you don't pronounce the last sound. So yeah, like you really have to be careful about those things, when you're pronouncing French. So yeah, your question is a very valid one, and it was difficult to learn French, like after learning Spanish and Portuguese. Do you bother just passively learn listening to podcasts to help you improve, like having news or interviews in the background? I do it sometimes, but like what think is that, I mean, at least for me, I can't say for anything for everyone else. I kind of like just listen to it and I don't think about it, which means that like it doesn't get stuck in my mind. So I would rather like read maybe like one paragraph or like two paragraph maybe for 10 minutes or something if I'm super busy, because that'll really make my mind work, and then which also means that there's a bigger probability of that word getting stuck in my head rather than just like listening and then yeah, like doing it passively. Because at least for me, um yeah, it tends to be a little less effective. What is your favorite language among the ones that I speak, and which languages would you like to learn in the future? uh, well, I would say that like languages are kind of like your children, in the sense that like you might be good in some language and you might be some not that good in the languages, but you love them equally, I would say that. So yeah, I would say that yeah, I like all the languages that I speak equally. But yeah, maybe I think that I listen to like songs and more in Spanish and in Portuguese, just because I like the melody and then how the songs are made. How long did it take to learn Chinese? Was it months, year? So yeah, again, in the case of me learning Chinese, and like I'll be honest, my Chinese it's nowhere the level of my Spanish or Portuguese or even French. As I had stated in the table as well, it's still like lower intermediate, I would say. It's not even intermediate. And also because I already had a huge vocabulary of kanjis when I had already started, like when I had started Chinese. But I would say that it took me at least more than a year, I would say that, before I started becoming comfortable in at least like talking in Chinese or like reading in Chinese. So yeah, definitely not months, I would say. I mean, you can feel you're getting better, but you said like to learn Chinese. So yeah, maybe to reach that certain threshold, I would say that yeah, it took me like at least a year or something. What materials did you use while learning Chinese? Podcast, movies, series, apps? So for Chinese, uh, well, just give me a second. I can just share the link right now. Uh, so there is YouTube, not YouTube, sorry, second. So this YouTube channel called Mandarin Corner, if I'm not mistaken, it is really good. And in that, like they have those videos in, I think they're in slow motion Chinese, so that those who are listening to them, like they don't feel the pressure of understanding everything. And if I'm not mistaken, like they have those subtitles in English and in Chinese, and then the greetings of those characters as well, which really helps to soak a lot of information at the same time, which is really helpful. And then other than that, I also use the language learning with Netflix while watching Chinese movies or dramas or anything in Netflix. I think it really helps. So for me, I think that like making sure that my mind is actively working is very important for me to be able to grasp that specific word or specific expression, so that I don't forget it easily. For me, it's something like really having to work for it, and then which helps me to become better in that language. So I think that's the end of the questions. And again, thank you very much for listening to the session. And I hope that all of you got at least something that is useful for your language learning journey. And I've also shared my Instagram handle in the session info. So yeah, please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions about the language that I've stated in the table, and I'll be more than happy to help out. So that's the end of my presentation session. Thanks all for listening. Thank you.